Masithandaze. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almachtige God, ons bid dat u gedrende ons vergadrings. Ons dien wat gewysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou. En dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela Nkosi ilizwe lethu nabantu balo. Umisele ukulunga kwiphondo lethu. Nkosi sikelela iAfrika. Gcina abantwana bayo. Khokhela Nkosi inkokheli zayo. Inike uxolo Nkosi iAfrika. All this we beg in your most holy name. Amen. May we all be seated. Honorable members, welcome. Honorable Premier, the leader of the opposition. Before we begin with our business, I would like to welcome a multi-party delegation from the National Parliament of Uganda that is seated up there in the gallery. Welcome, honorable members. The delegation will be in Cape Town for the week, and part of their program includes a visit to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament and to the National Parliament. The delegation will be with us for the day observing the proceedings, joining members for lunch in the dining room, and will also participate in a session on a South African political system and the election of office bearers later this afternoon. And my parliamentary advisor, Ms. Yani Ace, will be taking them through that process. And I must say that, Honorable Premier and Honorable members, the leader of the opposition, I had an engagement with them this morning and to share some light moments with them about our visit to Uganda recently with the Deputy Speaker and Honorable Van Vogel and the Secretary to Parliament. And they love South Africa. They love South Africa. And they are happy that they are here. They say this is the best place in the world, and Cape Town is the best place in the world. So the visit was organized by the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, and we're also fortunate that we met the institute when we were in Netherlands earlier on towards the last quarter of this calendar year. So this is again an opportunity to see the work that they do on the ground. So the organization was established. To monitor and assist processes of democracy and parliamentary democracy, human rights. And when we went to The Hague, we witnessed firsthand, they even have a mural of Nelson Mandela in their wall, and that was for me quite touching. So this is the first visit we have received through this initiative with the NIMD. And again, thank you for conducting this visit. So colleagues, we wish you and your various teams as part of the broader delegation very well during your stay here. And I must say that Honorable Patrick Oboy Amuriat, the leader of the delegation, again, he says he's from the opposition, but he's leading, including the ruling party as part of that delegation. So thank you very much. We are a multi-party parliament. As you can see, we are quite diverse with a multilateral understanding of the world, but also with the plurality of ideas in this parliament. So good luck as you oversee our proceedings here today. Thank you very much, honorable members. Now I would like the Secretary to read the first order of the day.
Vote 1, Premier, Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Honorable members, I now recognize the Premier of the Western Cape Government.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Speaker, honourable members of this House, visiting guests, and of course I recognise the CFO in the box and understand that the DG and our team are actually busy with the CFO forum at the moment, and of course we excuse them for that, and I thank the CFO for being here or excusing himself from that body. But Speaker, last week Minister David Mania outlined the medium-term budget adjustment which highlighted the spending priorities of the Western Cape Government. The primary focus of the budget is squarely on the implementation of the safety plan, which will be implemented across departments. This is an integrated plan across all spheres of government, with a relentless focus on making this province safer for the people who live in it, even if it is not our key mandate. Speaker, I thank Minister Mania and the Treasury officials for the hard work and long hours they have put in to ensure that this budget balances our need to make the province safer with our priorities of economic growth, empowering people, enhancing mobility and spatial transformation, and investing in innovation. Not only innovation externally within the province, but also innovation within government, and added to innovation within government, culture, and the culture of the organisation, the Western Cape Government. Speaker, the adjustment in the Department of the Premier largely relates to the additional funds received and shifts made between votes. I must highlight that two of the largest numbers appearing in this budget are as a result of actions by the National Government and SARS. In March this year, the National Minister of Finance introduced an amendment to the VAT regulations pertaining to electronic services. The amendment came into effect on 1 April and affected the licensing charges of our Microsoft products. As a result, we were required to pay VAT of 15 million rand, for which we had made no budgetary provision in previous or in the budget process to cover those costs of approximately 24,500 workstations in this government. The Provincial Treasury has agreed that this expenditure is unforeseen and unavoidable, and as a result, our vote has been adjusted accordingly. Speaker, we are still in discussion with the Provincial Treasury with regard to the VAT charges for the MTEF period going ahead, as well as other pressures relating to software licensing. Speaker, as a result of our failing national economy, our poor fiscal decisions, the National Treasury made a call to manage the public sector wage bill very carefully. This government has for a few years now been committed to making prudent financial decisions, but nonetheless the Department of the Premier has heeded this call. The department has been managing recruitment through a special committee which determines whether posts need to be filled immediately or whether they can be filled at a later stage. This has yielded a 34 million rand saving, which can be surrendered to the Provincial Treasury to help ease the fiscal pressures that we are under. And this team and this process has been very careful in weighing up the impact of not filling posts on service delivery. Service delivery has not been sacrificed in order to make these savings. The Western Cape positioned itself as a tech hub, and in order to attract the interest and investment, we need to grow this sector further. We need to be connected, and we need to be innovative. In the Department of the Premier, a number of adjustments and funding shifts are related to this focus on improving connectivity and developing innovative IT systems that can help us solve the problems we face, from helping to make the province safer to dealing with pollutants and waste, etc., etc. The Department of the Premier's baseline budget has increased to 1.582 billion. An internal shift of 5 million rand was made to the Cape Access Centres. These 71 e-centres are spread across the province and provide free access to ICT and digital skills development opportunities in the Western Cape. These centres are a valuable tool for learners and for students, the unemployed, and for entrepreneurs. Every day we see how access to the internet changes lives and connects people. An internet connection can link people to education and healthcare services. It allows a job seeker to access hundreds of job positionings or postings, and it can also help an entrepreneur set up their business without needing an expensive shopfront or marketing campaigns. It's vital to our economic development and can play a major role in how we empower women, vulnerable communities, and the disabled. We have seen from recent high-profile cases where online and community networks have been mobilized to help solve crimes. Internet access has also had an important role to play in the fight against crime and making communities safer. It is vital that we play a role in helping communities connect, and that is why the Department of the Premier signed a new Wi-Fi agreement in December 2018, allowing us to expand Wi-Fi to approximately 1,600 of our own buildings. The free public Wi-Fi service will be rolled out at our schools, clinics, hospitals, rural libraries, and other government buildings so that the public can easily access internet services. The rollout, Mr. Speaker, of the broadband strategy and implementation plan, however, has progressed well during the year under review, despite some challenges. During the first phase of the broadband project, 1,875 sites were connected. The second phase has commenced, and by November, 898 sites had been upgraded to minimum speeds of 1 gig per second. We are also rolling out limited broadband to the municipal sphere, and so far 21 municipalities have been connected. The province decided to include municipal offices for broadband connectivity in order to extend the benefits of this investment made by the province at municipal level. Speaker, the adjustment estimates that we will see 19.552 million rand in funding shifted to the Department of the Premier. These funding flows cover a number of initiatives, primarily in the ICT space. The Corporate Services Centre funding model offers an agreed set of deliverables, and departments will provide funding for any additional requirements that they may need. As such, there are shifts from education to fund competency-based assessments for schools, from health to install a wide area network for the Western Cape College of Nursing, and from the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning to develop an integrated pollutant and waste management information system. The Department of Community Safety has shifted a total of 2.5 million rand for the development of software systems for the safety projects. As we move towards data-driven and evidence-based policing in our security plan, it is vital that we start to invest in technology and systems that will assist us in the fight against crime. Speaker, we are looking to develop technology that will enable us to identify micro-locations of crime and analyze criminal incidents. It could allow us to develop hotspot maps, heat maps, and link the information to and coming from our traffic system, from citizens, and from neighbourhood watchers. Speaker, I would like to at this point thank the Director General and his team in the Department of the Premier for the sterling work that they do. I would also like to thank the members of my Cabinet and their HODs and staff for their commitment to the priorities of this government and ensuring a culture of service delivery and excellence, specifically during these tough times as we put this adjustment budget together, but not only the adjustment budget, as we put all of the work streams together in developing the 5-year plan, which will be tabled shortly, in developing the programs for each of our focused strategic areas and how we land those in the budgets according to that 5-year plan over the next few months so that they're all in place as the budget, not only the adjustment budget, but as the full budget gets tabled before the end of March. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Honourable members, now I recognize Honourable Mackenzie, the chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Premier. Honourable Speaker, in the words of the Provincial Treasury's acting head official, Julinta Gantana, and she said, the 2019 adjusted estimates have been compiled in a deteriorating fiscal environment and constrained economic outlook for the 2020 MTEF. I close quote. Speaker, it is accurate to say that the acting head official was simply being diplomatic when she used those words. The harsh reality is that our country's finances is in trouble, heading towards a fiscal cliff. The barbarians have broken through the gate, and there's nothing left to give to Caesar. The start a skull. There is no other way to put it. There is no money. Honourable Speaker, despite these circumstances, the windy of change continue to blow through the Western Cape. In this regard, I'd like to welcome and congratulate Mr. Heli Malila on his appointment as Director General of the Western Cape. Mr. Malila comes with incredible experience as a public servant, and we wish him well as he blows with the wind in bringing change to the people of this province. The Democratic Alliance welcomes this adjustment budget as presented by Minister David Maniak. The Standing Committee has also welcomed this budget, and we will continue to fulfill our oversight role in making this province better. As the chairperson of the Standing Committee, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank the Premier and Minister Maniak in finding 1.3 billion rand to make this province safer. During the campaign trail, the Premier made it crystal clear that safety and security would form part of his key priorities and form part of this government's mantra of vision-inspired priorities. Accountability and transparency has always been the hallmark of this government. This has been further vindicated by the latest report released by the Auditor General, where the Western Cape government received the best audit outcome in the country, with 79% of departments receiving clean audits. The recent undertaking of the adjustment budget process is no different. Speaker, over the last few weeks, the Honourable Premier visited communities in Mitchells Plain, Delft, Atlantis, and the Elsies River, where residents had the opportunity to engage in the safety strategy and give input. Speaker, I was privileged to be part of this process, where I attended meetings in Mitchells Plain, where the community of Mitchells Plain clearly welcomed this Western Cape safety strategy, as gangsterism on the Cape Flats is currently one of the biggest concerns. Honourable Speaker, the current wage bill is unsustainable, and we welcome any measures by the department that seek to save on the wage bill where staff leave and retirements are concerned. We, however, caution the department that frontline services should not be affected, and we urge the department to find a balance between cost-cutting and cost-saving. Speaker, we also know the 15 million rand charge due to the tax directive from SARS. We all know SARS gives tax directive throughout the year, but we are equally mindful of the fact that the national government has brought SARS to its knees. And this is the reason why they're continuously looking and implement tech directives to get money from provinces. Speaker, as we were debating last week, Eskom announced another 20 billion rand loss. This equates to a total of 40 billion losses in under 3 years. To put things into perspective, the total cost of Gautrain is 36 billion and the Western Cape government's budget is 67 billion. The numbers are staggering. Our people are suffering, but despite the in-migration, as presented to us by National Treasury, the Western Cape government, under the leadership of Premier Winde, still delivering. To embed good governance, you need good leadership at all levels, including the department. And that's all I'd like to take the opportunity. I see Mr. Driekus is on his own today. Welcome him and his department to continue to look for money to make these vision-inspired priorities a priority. Honourable Speaker, Member Dagmo said in the committee that he fully supports efforts to make the province safer. We welcome the Premier's safety strategy. However, but when it came to 2 o'clock last week afternoon, Mr. Dagmo flip-flopped from a safety strategy to a working document. Whatever you want to call it, Member Dagmo and Member Heron, the point is not one of these members has provided an alternative for safety in the Western Cape. All our colleagues at National Parliament, when they debate in debates, they provide an alternative. From the national health insurance to universal health care to alternative budget as presented many times by my colleague David Maniak. So none of these members in the committee did not provide alternative. It is widely reported that South Africa is in an economic crisis. In fact, frankly, Premier, we are in an ANC crisis. For South Africa to save, the ANC must fail. In the words of Minister Maniak, unless we IMF ourselves, we will be IMF'd by the IMF. To quote National Government Minister Tito Mboweni, he's saying they are having rigorous debates. The Gauteng Premier is saying they are transforming, while in the Western Cape, we are actually delivering. Premier, we welcome the 5 million for the Cape Access Centre, and members of this House was in Lynburg when we conducted oversight to the Cape Access Centre, and we all welcomed the report. It was a brilliant initiative, it was run well, functioning well. Of course, one now is going to get additional money for that project. Speaker, during the last few weeks during this process, we also had to deal with the traditional courts bill. In typical ANC style, they gave us a hospital pass. The bill was dumped on us the Tuesday, but the next week we were on public hearings with members of that House, and we did it very well. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the parliamentary administrative staff for booking accommodation, arranging transport, driving us up and down the province safe. It was really an incredible work done in a short space of time by the ANC who consistently give us hospital pass. Speaker and Premier, the Western Cape DA supports this adjustment budget and asks that members of this House get behind this adjustment budget. Don't be left behind, members. Member Herron, it's not good for your health. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mackenzie. Thank you, honorable members. I now recognize Honorable Dagmo, the leader of the opposition.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Speaker. I'd also like to join you in welcoming our guests from Uganda and to say that we, as the African National Congress, always welcome opportunities to learn from our African brothers and sisters to deal with the issues of inequality, poverty, and the colonial legacy which continues to disempower our continent and our country. And we look forward to those exchanges so that we can actually build an Africa that is renewed, that is united, and that can share the resources that we have amongst our people. Thank you very much for honoring us with your visit today. Speaker, when the Premier was elected earlier this year, he inherited a budget that he, as part of the then Provincial Cabinet, actually participated in compiling. That budget was based on the strategic priorities set by his predecessor, former Premier Zille. When we look at this adjustment budget and the medium-term expenditure review, we should begin to see signs of the new provincial priorities, or what is now being referred to as vision-inspired priorities. It is this department, the Department of the Premier, together with Treasury, that needs to provide direction and guidance to all departments. Members of this House were presented with the 2020 medium-term expenditure budget, the plans and the priorities. If you look at the Vision-Inspired Priority 1, it refers to enhanced capacity and effectiveness of policing and law enforcement, and also strengthened youth at-risk referral pathways and child and family-centered initiatives to reduce violence. The reality is, in this budget, we have simply seen evidence of a commitment to boots on the ground, breaking of the original province, and not a single cent allocated to the causes that contribute to violence. And our plan is very clear. Those 10 key areas affected by murder in this province need infrastructure investment. There's no evidence of that in those communities. Need support for businesses in those areas, support for social development. There's no evidence. In fact, the budget of sport and recreation in this is being cut. So let us be very, very clear that although the Premier talks about a safety strategy and a plan, it is not yet a plan. It is simply a boots on the ground to try and create bells and whistles, but not actually deal with the real problems. The real problems involve going into Langa, going into Nyanga, going to Mitchell's Plain, and investing in the infrastructure that is required there. That would be a plan, time-bound and linked to money. Then the Vision-Inspired Priority number 4 refers to more opportunities for people to live in better locations. Our guests in the gallery would know that this city and this province were affected by apartheid, where if you were classified as white, you could live in a certain area. If you were classified as black, you could not live in certain areas. So we have a responsibility to help people to live, in the words of the vision, in better locations. In other words, undo apartheid spatial planning. But in this adjustment appropriation budget, we do not actually see that evidence. On page 6 of this adjustment budget, program 5.5 under legal services, reference is made to the reprioritization of funding allocated for capital expenditure to, in fact, fund expenditure associated with litigation. In other words, when this province goes to court. I want to link one of the newly announced vision-inspired priorities, number 4, which includes the commitment to more opportunities to live in better locations, to this sub-program 5.5. Just last week, Speaker, this provincial government was in court trying to defend its indefensible decision to sell the Tafelberg School to private interests instead of using it for social housing. The Premier needs to inform this House whether this adjustment was also necessitated to cover the costs of the advocates to defend the indefensible. We were shocked to hear the advocate for the provincial government argue that the constitutional right to housing does not mean that people can choose exactly where the house that they want to live in or what type of house it is. This was the stated position of the provincial government. The legal representatives of this government paid for from this vote are mandated by the Premier to convey the official position of this government. The Premier needs to clarify to this House today whether this is the view that he shares. If indeed this is the view of the provincial government, it is clear that well-located social housing will never be built in the CBD under the DA. It hasn't been built up to now, and we cannot expect it to be the case. We would also like to know, Speaker, what amount has been budgeted for in this matter, which seeks to defend the provincial government's decision to sell Tafelberg? How much money have we allocated to this legal defence? Was mediation not considered as an option? And now we hear that we will only be a judgment in this matter in 6 months from now. I think it is also important to share with this House the contents of an affidavit which was compiled in a criminal case of intimidation against the former chief whip of this legislature, which has direct bearing on the matter that I'm raising in this legislature today. The affidavit also refers to the role of the former MEC for Public Works, who now works as a senior advisor in the Premier's office. And I would like to read from that affidavit because it indicates that, in fact, there's a strategy at play here to stop using well-located social land for affordable social housing. That affidavit says that on the same day, the 14th of April at about 12:40, members Mkhasela, Hinana and myself, that is a former member Max, visited the relevant MEC, Mr. Grant, in order to gain clarity about the issue, as it is public property which generated a lot of public interest, and thus my and the committee's responsibility was to get on top of the facts. These meetings are called study groups where DA members of the committee meet with MECs with regard to issues in respect of their portfolios. At first, Mr. Grant refused to discuss the selling of the Tafelberg School, as a dispute is currently before the Western Cape High Court. He, however, was prepared to explain the apparent dispute between his department and the Department of Human Settlements. And further, since the disputing parties in the Tafelberg School have reached a court settlement, I, as the chairperson, placed the Tafelberg School issue on the committee's agenda to be dealt with at the committee meeting in order to get for the first time a factual and progress briefing. I subsequently, on the same day at about 12:46, received an email from Mr. Wiley, who questioned as to why I placed the Tafelberg issue on the agenda. And then the final paragraph, Mr. Wiley's email clearly indicates that I should first consult with Mr. Grant, who is now in your office, before placing this topic on the agenda. In other words, I should first obtain Mr. Grant or Mr. Wiley's permission to place items on the agenda. And then he goes forward to quote Section 114 of the Constitution and Rule 77.3 of our rules, which say that the chairperson of a committee presides over meetings, determines the agenda of each meeting, and performs the functions. What we have here, Speaker, is a deliberate attempt to actually cover up the reasons behind the selling of the Tafelberg School. And in this adjustment appropriation, we have money from this department being spent to defend the indefensible, wasting taxpayers' money to, in fact, prevent black and coloured people from staying in Tafelberg in Sea Point. That is the reality which exemplifies this provincial government. You talk about transformation, you talk about allowing people to live in better places, but you spend money on advocates to actually oppose the very achievement of integrated social housing. That is the government that we are dealing with. So it is very clear that this conduct is in direct contradiction of the vision-inspired priority number 4, which talks to more opportunities for people to live in better locations. In fact, you're using money from this vote to actually go against your very vision that you proclaim. This is what the DA is all about.
Honorable, the leader of the opposition, you need to wrap up, sir.
Okay, I would like to wrap up to say it is the department of the Premier that is supposed to champion these priorities. Yet we have the situation where funds from this vote and this adjustment are being used for legal action which is aimed at preventing people living in better, well-located places.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Thank you, Honourable Tagmo. Order, Honourable Members. I now recognize Honourable Tagmo.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Let me also welcome the guests in the auditorium there, for coming to South Africa to say to our brothers, welcome to South Africa, and as the EFF, we are looking forward to meeting you after this arrangement. We see, Premier, that in the same adjustment budget, there is a 15 million unavoidable expenditure. Now, what we want to understand is that, does that mean there is a lack of proper planning, or what led to such kind of poor arrangement? As we look forward, we see that there is a cycle tour that took place and a cabinet outreach program that resulted in the shifting of funds from the CCTV cameras. So those are serious challenges that we have got, a serious challenge of crime and everything else, and your understanding is to have an outreach and a tour of cycling. And then we look forward to the issue of the Department of Public Works and Transport. We have noted that there was a slow rollout of the modernization program, of which it is a serious challenge. It's fine. It's under the stewardship of the Premier. The Premier is looking at all these kind of things. And then we have noted, as the EFF, that in all, under your stewardship, your arrangement, there is a continuing lack of appointment and the filling of vacant posts.
Your time is up. Thank you, Honorable Member. I would have loved to give you more time, but my hands are tied, Honorable Member. May I please, Honorable Members, recognize Honorable Heron.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I first of all want to concur with Honourable Cameron Dugmore's observations about Tafelberg. I was in court last week, and the arguments being proposed by this provincial government are in fact tragic and unsustainable, and are not in alignment with the Premier's commitment to spatial transformation. Premier, you have, Speaker, through you, Premier, you have indicated that this budget focuses on the safety plan. Once again, I remind you, you do not have a safety plan. You have a working document. But I also want to remind you that at each vote, each department has to say whether they've made changes to their programs, their purposes, their objectives, and their measures, and not one of your departments recognizes the safety plan. Even your own department, even under measures, you do not measure anything new about the safety plan. This safety plan does not exist other than a transfer of 130 million rand to the City of Cape Town without any basis for that transfer at all. You do not have a safety plan, you have a safety vision. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. Honourable Members, the following parties, ACDP, Freedom Front Plus, Al-Jamar Party, are not here yet. So therefore, their opportunity to speak has been forfeited. I will now recognize...
invite one of the honourable members from Uganda to actually take up those minutes.
Thank you, Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition. That was a good move, thank you. May I now request the Premier to take a stand, Honourable Premier?
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you very much to those of you who've taken part in this debate. An adjustment debate, but I noticed that it was quite a far-reaching and wide debate and not really focusing on the adjustment. But I thank those speakers for the inputs anyway. Can I start off obviously with the Chair? Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your inputs. Thank you for the role that you play in the committee itself. And of course, you're right. The difficulty is in an environment where we have to look at adjustments. And the adjustment process is in your existing budget, your existing plan, and how you adjust money within that existing space, bearing in mind the external pressures, and of course looking at the next year and the next 3 years. It is quite critical that that adjustment process gets seen in the context of that space. And of course the no money, and of course the bailouts. Every time that National Treasury bails out one of our failing institutions, then what happens is it has a direct impact specifically on our big departments like education and health, because that's where our budgets, our primary percentage of budgets go, and when you start cutting at that level, it is where we feel it the most and the hardest. And these processes are very, very difficult. And of course, I've been involved in this for 10 years already in this government, as the leader of the opposition said. And I remember the first 5 years when I was in Treasury, we sat with a global recession and a recession in South Africa. And for 10 years, we've had this pressure coming on, but never have I felt it the way that we're feeling it at the moment. It really, really is a tough environment in which to be adjusting and also putting your budgets together for the next 5 years in alignment with your PSP, etc. Thank you very much. Your comment on the audits and the audit outcomes. And of course, you know that I have some specific views around balancing clean audits to service delivery on the ground. And I mean, if we're talking about safety, our Department of Community Safety has received 10 clean audits now in a row. But of course, we all know that on the ground, and it's about finding that balance, and we will be having those discussions with National Treasury and the Auditor General. I also want to say that, speaking to the adjustments, you mentioned specifically the Cape Access Centres, and it's really nice that we have got some money to do maintenance, upgrading where necessary, and looking at those centres, because they do create a real opportunity. And definitely, I know that even in my own visiting of those sites, it's really great to see in remote rural areas where you see people getting an opportunity to link into education programs, to link into future jobs, to link into, even if it's doing a year program here in the government, making sure that they've applied, or to Chrysalis or wherever, using those portals. So it is vital. So thank you very much for that. To the Honourable Dugmore, you're absolutely 100% correct that you've seen the one thing that you see in this adjustment is the first start of some money going towards the boots on the ground. And of course, in the Standing Committee, you would have heard it. In this House, you would have heard it. In the safety plan, or whether you want to call it a strategy or whatever you want to call it, in that, looking at how do we make people safer in this province, there are two sides to this equation. The one is boots on the ground, and the other one is how every single one of these departments are involved, planning and budgeting for that process. But of course, and I'm sure that you have taken note while being in this government for years in opposition, but of course, remember, way back, you used to be in government as well. And I'm sure you remember in those days that when you take over a government, you've got an existing budget. If you want to realign priorities, you've got to put it into your plans. And of course, that is this overall provincial strategic plan, 2019 to 2024. And in this plan, which we will release, this goes live, I think, on the 3rd. We've already taken this plan to our municipalities. I was part of at the PCF. We took this plan to every one of our municipalities, and it's interesting to see the comments coming back from our municipalities. This has gone past our own Bosberaad, etc. But it's interesting, I still have yet to see the national government's 5-year plan. I'm not sure where that is, but you will see how this plan has to integrate every single one of those priorities. This budget, the adjustment budget which we're talking about now, is adjusting the current budget, the pressures that we're feeling, and moving money around, because you're trying to understand what you're going to be spending according to the existing 5-year plan, the last year's budget. And so some things find traction. And specifically, I've pushed very hard for the boots on the ground component to get earlier traction in our adjustment budget and in the plans, because it must align with the City of Cape Town, who are critical partners in this space. And of course, we needed to be able to start to get the recruitment process on the ground, because the first 500 need to be recruited now if they're to be deployed in February. The second thing is the second 500 have to be deployed early in the new year, when our budget only gets finalized at the end of March. And at that budget, all of these plans will also be in place. I explained that to you in the committee when we came, and said to you directly that some of and you'll remember, I said some of our departments, like social development, have already even committed to how many families they will be visiting and in those 10 hotspot focus areas. Right down to, and we spoke about the gap in the system at the moment, is really getting commitment around economic investment, because it doesn't help if you move into an area to make it safer with boots on the ground, and you cannot come in with economic opportunities or something that claims that space when you take the crime out of the way. But also, all of this is iterative, because we have to learn as we're going. We've never done this before, and it's interesting because it'll also go to, I'll say that now when I speak to the Honourable Heron, but it's exactly the point that I'm making here. You call for where are all these adjustments in these departments. This adjustment budget is not where this plan lands, because our legislative and regulatory environment doesn't land the overall PSP. And of course, this working document safety plan is embedded in this plan. I'm not sure if I should continue with this workshop, but this plan then has to be embedded into this plan, and you will see it in all of these spaces where every single department then has to make their choices on the first 1,000 days on how the Minister of Health and her department will be intervening. You will see it on the 3rd. So, of course, because I don't think you actually understand the processes of government. You've been in this government since, I think you were in government before I was in government, and I've been here way too long. You should understand it, and please explain it to the new members of your
Honourable
caucus.
Premier, will you please take your seat? Honourable members, the beauty of oversight is that we must allow the executive to express themselves. Otherwise, we will not hear exactly what the executive seeks to do in response to our oversight and holding the executive to account. So in this case, let us please allow the Premier to speak and observe Rule 39, read together with Rule 40 of our standing rules. Thank you, Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much. And so again, I say to you, this is an adjustment budget. It is not the budget. And of course, we are still busy in the whole process of MTech. And we've gone through the first round, and we will be going through the next round in January and early February, so that we can land the new budget and all of the plans post the coming together of this new 6th Parliament and new 6th government in our administration and in our processes, or in our province. Then the point that you raise around funding going towards legal services, I can assure you that the legal process that's happening around Tafelberg was already in place. It didn't have to be funded separately. But of course, there are pressures in that department, and that's you can actually ask those direct questions of exactly what those pressures are going to cover. But you used it, and very cleverly used that budget change to actually bring out an issue of a court process on specifically the Tafelberg site. And we will wait for the outcome of this court case. I have made statements on this before. And of course, this property must not be seen in isolation. We already know that we've gone far way down the road with Helen Bowden. And it will be interesting to actually ask whether you are prepared to come and help us with the illegal occupation of Helen Bowden, as we are trying to develop the space for specifically what you're talking about social housing. It's interesting that you do not mention...
Will you please take your seat? What's your point of order, Honourable Said?
On a point of order, just to caution for the Premier to please speak directly to the Speaker, not to address the Leader of the Opposition directly. And perhaps going forward, that can be the approach from both sides of the House, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Said. Honourable members, Honourable Said is correct. Our standing rules Order. Order, honorable members. Honorable Said, honorable members, is correct. Our standing rules make provision for a member to address any matter through the speaker. So it's always important to observe that there's always a temptation at times to do otherwise. So let us please observe the standing rules. And for that, I then request the Premier to proceed. Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much. And if the honourable member, Leader of the Opposition, will remember that when the Tafelberg process was put in place of actually opening up some funding so that we could look at moving the education department out of rented premises into owned premises, was actually what that was for right in the very beginning. But he fails to mention the Helen Bowden, he fails to mention the Woodstock Hospital, he actually fails to mention even his own political party's long dragging of their feet of dealing with the District 6 properties, etc., etc. So one wonders what this populist statement of his in the middle of this budget vote. But we will deal with this. We will abide by the court ruling, and we will bring that to the House, I'm sure, many times between now and probably even the landing of the budget and the actual landing of all of these plans on safety, which everybody has got a lot to say. The Honourable Klejo, thank you very much. I think quite interesting, you ask whether there was not proper planning, but I explained to you in the beginning of the speech that the 15 million rand for the VAT was not in our plan because it was a change by SARS and the National Minister to say that now VAT is applicable, which it wasn't applicable before. We didn't know this was coming, so it wasn't about planning, it was about unknown, and therefore this unforeseen expenditure, we have to then adjust it in the budget. I think with regards to the slow spending on some of the cameras, you've got to make a decision on what to do with that funding. What we have made a decision to do is to become more open, and of course that's the first Thursdays that some of that funding has gone to. Every single first Thursday of the month, totally open to the public. Come along, meet with us. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but at least it does cost something, and we've got to make sure we enable that. You spoke about the cycle tour in the province. Of course, that one as well. There we were visiting schools with partners, handing out hundreds and hundreds of bicycles, visiting libraries, handing out books, having part of a cabinet outreach, which the leader of government business makes sure that we are meeting the public. I think that is a priority of any government, to make sure that you get to the people. But you can see by the amount of money, this is not big, how does the Minister of Agriculture say, eat, meet and greet. This is about really getting to the people, engaging, and at the same time making sure that you are making a difference in the lives of people. And quite interesting to see the change in education outcomes when you focus on enabling children to be able to get to school and back on a bicycle. It makes a big, big difference. And so that's part of that. And then, of course, the filling of posts. And I think, I'm not sure whether you heard me say in the beginning, we've got a committee that focuses on saying, is service delivery going to be affected by this post, or can we hold back on that filling of that post because of the National Treasury and our own directives of how are we going to save? We have got to cut billions out of our budget in this province and billions in South Africa because of the slow economy, slow investment rate, and we need to be able to fix that. And of course, the filling of posts is a critical area where you can do it. But we need to find that balance. And of course, wherever we can find that balance, surrender some of that money back so that we can actually find those spaces of saving. Then, of course, the Honourable Heron, again, also spoke about Tafelberg. I've mentioned it. Then he mentioned the plan, or whatever he wants to call it. I say exactly the same thing. The safety plan is not in the annual performance plan numbers. It is in our next 5-year strategy. You've also been in government long enough to understand that. But I also want to use the space in which, whether you call it a plan or not, I want to use this space to actually say to all of those professionals at our universities, those criminologists, I want to say to those professional policy people, I want to say to the international and business people who have come along to help devise this plan, I want to really thank them for their input. I want to actually use this position to thank the Minister of Police, Minister Becky Cele, who I have got a long record of fighting with around safety in our province. But him coming along and saying, Premier, we take note of this plan that you've put on the table, and we want to talk to you about how we want to interact with the investigators. And within days, our teams from here, from Minister Fritz's office, within days we're in Pretoria talking to their teams on how they can engage so that we can embed it in this document and the budgets in this department as we go forward. But I want to use this space, and you can call the plan whatever you like. I want to use this space to say that I really want to thank every single person across this province, across this country, and even internationally, the people that have been involved in putting this plan together, the people that have been involved in saying we want to help, and you will see when we get to the debates in March, when we start to have a look at who in the private sector and who internationally are also adding their weight and money towards this plan, because they understand we have to do something different. We have to get involved in doing whatever possible to make sure that we make this province safer, that we make the people in this province safer, because they are far too pressured, far too under the threat of being able to get to school safely, being able to get to the hospital safely, be able to open their business safely. It is a big issue for us, and we will take it on. And we actually would like to, at some stage, ask the opposition members to either play a positive part or shut up. One of the two. Because playing a positive part in this space,
Honorable members, order. Honorable the Deputy Chief Whip of the
Chair, on a point of order, is it parliamentary for terms such as shut up to be used in the House, Chair? I don't think it's correct.
Thank you, Honorable Said. All right, thank you, honorable members. In the past, we dealt with this matter in this same chamber. The statement, if it is referred to a particular member, it is unparliamentary. But if it's a general statement, it is okay. Now, I would like, honorable members, can I please proceed with my response? So I would like to ask the Honorable Premier, were you referring to a specific member of the opposition?
Speaker, to avoid any kind of misunderstanding, I withdraw that word.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Premier.
Speaker,
The leader
further
of the
point
opposition.
of order. The other, he's no longer a guilty party because he has shown courage and dignity. But Honourable Member Fritz could not contain himself and also said shut up. So could you please appeal to him to follow his premier's example, Honourable Speaker?
All right. Thank you. I'm going to maintain this because this is a parliament where we rule based on the rules of order, not on emotion. So what I was trying to make, it was a determination, honorable members and the leader of the opposition, of whether the Premier, in his statement, was referring to a specific member in the House. So instead of the Premier responding, he withdrew his own statement. So now that closes the matter on the Premier's part. So for Honorable the Minister Fritz, I will put the same question to him. Then he must clear himself or subject himself to the rules, whatever the case may be. Honorable Fritz?
Yeah, I refer to the ANC in general.
Thank you, Honorable Fritz. That, honorable members, that puts that statement by Honorable Fritz to bed. So there's no further debate on that one. May I then request that we take 5 minutes comfort break? You're not done? Okay. Honorable members, all right, thank you. Honorable Premier, my apologies, please proceed.
So thank you very much, Speaker. And so I say again that honourable members in this House, obviously their job is oversight, but I also ask them, if they come, please come to this House. They represent people in this province. Come to this House with not just objection to something, but perhaps with an alternative idea, because I did say that right in the very beginning in this House when we started this 6th term, that people can bring ideas. I want to change, you know, people must be able to bring ideas and we must be able to say, that's a great idea. Let's see how we can embed that in our system. Because we really have to make this place a better place, a safer place, a prosperous place, a happy place for all the citizens of this province. And it's up to all of us to be able to do that. And so in ending, I want to again thank all of those officials who've been involved in this adjustment and thank those that took part in this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Honourable members, we'll just take 5 minutes comfort in waiting for the next budget vote to begin. Until then, let us hang in there. Thank you. Thank you, Premier.